Hey everyone, welcome to this brand new episode of the Clear to Send podcast. We're also recording this in video, just so you guys can see what we're presenting, because we're going to talk about dashboards, cloud dashboards that manage our access points, right? So we're going to do a series of videos where we go into different vendors' dashboards to try to identify things like Wi-Fi issues. We want to see how well these things stand up, how accurate they are. And so we thought we'd try it out, right? We'd try to simulate some common issues and then see how quickly we can find these issues, right, Francois?
Mm-hmm. How easy it is for the network engineer or operator to get the information and get help from the dashboard, because this is mainly the first place we're going to go. If we're managing a Wi-Fi network and something goes wrong, we'll go back to the dashboard and try to understand what's going on. So that's kind of like what we're trying to see here is how fast can we get the information we need to troubleshoot what's going on and find the root cause. I guess that's the goal.
Yeah, exactly. And in this episode, we're going to look at Meraki. So we're using their dashboard. Now, we're not going to look into any other issues outside of Wi-Fi, right? So they are full stack. There's firewall switches, but we're only going to look at the access points. So I've joined my MR36 to the dashboard. I've given Francois access so he could also see what I'm seeing, and we'll kind of look at it from both of our perspectives, and we'll try to be neutral, I guess, because I'm very familiar with the Meraki dashboard, but we have to think maybe as somebody else who may not be familiar with the dashboard, right? It may not be a really technical person who is doing the troubleshooting. It might be assigned to somebody else, and then they're trying to figure out what's going on with the network. How familiar are you, Francois, with the dashboard?
I guess not as much as you. I don't work with Meraki very often. I've worked with it in the past, so I kind of know the interface. The recent projects I've been working on were more, Cisco or Mist, so I haven't been spending a lot of time in Meraki. So when you gave me access to it, I discovered a few new things that they added since the last time I've worked with it. So I guess I can have that newbie look to the dashboard. You'll have
All
like the
right.
expert look. I'll be the newbie here, and we can talk about what I like and stuff like that.
Okay.
For sure.
So what I'm going to do is end up sharing my screen. So if you guys head over to the show notes, go to cleartosend.net, you will find the video as well if you want to walk through it with us. We'll be as descriptive as possible. And what I'm going to do is log into my dashboard. I've already done that. And I'm just going to go straight to network wide and clients. That's kind of where we start off with viewing your dashboard, I guess, right when you get in. So you kind of see all your clients that are connected and not connected. You have to do kind of a search or a drop down to really just say, maybe I just want to see connected devices that are online. So I have my iPhone connected. You can tell I'm using the private MAC address. What's weird about this is yesterday it actually showed the host name. So, you know why? Because I forgot the SSID. So we simulated different issues in my test network. So I only have my iPhone connected to this network. There are two SSIDs, which I could show you. If you go over to wireless and then SSIDs over on the left, there are two SSIDs. One is a pre-shared key, which these are kind of the settings. I didn't really do anything special. And then we have an 802.1x. So yesterday I set up free radius on my Intel NUC just to test free radius, right? I tried doing it on the WLAN Pi, Francois, and I tried using your video, but I kept running into issues with the OS. Something with root, right? I wasn't able to successfully like modify things and see things. So instead of troubleshooting that, I had forgotten I had already a free radius VM. So all I did was turn it on, and then assigned the radius server. So if I go into the settings of the SSID for the 802.1x, we can see the radius settings, right? So I'm using network access enterprise with my radius server, and so down below I can set up my radius server. There's the host, the IP address, the port that it's going to that we're using for authentication, the secret, and we can even test this out, right? And that's important for troubleshooting. Is if you want to make sure your server is connected, you could test this. I have a test user account. I don't even remember the password anymore, but we can begin the test, and the test will run against all your APs, right? So it says, well, the authentication failed, but the radius server was reachable. So it'll test reachability, and it'll test whether or not the account you're using is authenticating. So far, so good, Francois?
Yeah.
All right,
so that's your setup. You have an AP with a couple of SSIDs, one PSK, one .1x. Now, what about the issues that we're trying to troubleshoot and generate?
So we tried a couple of issues. One, not being able to reach the radius server. 2, wrong pre-shared key. 3, wrong user account for the 802.1x. And then the fourth one, DHCP issues, right? I think that happens a lot. Like there's some DHCP server that's not reachable or misconfigured. So we generated all those kind of events, right? And then as a user, where do we go to try to figure that out, right? Someone says, all right, maybe I'll put it on your plate, Francois. Someone says, hey, I was trying to connect to Wi-Fi and it's not working. That's typically how vague that's going to be, right?
Wi-Fi sucks. Can you fix it, please?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little hint and just say I could not connect to Wi-Fi. There. Where would you go to try to figure out what the problem is? Because I'm on the right when I log in, you can't really tell that there's an issue, right?
No, it's not that obvious. One thing that I like with Meraki is the health dashboard.
Okay.
So maybe you can show that out.
Yeah. So Meraki has a health dashboard, which is fairly new, and that's under wireless. So technically, it's called wireless health, but I believe they're going to probably encompass that with everything. So right now, it's currently under the wireless section under monitor, and at the bottom it's just health. So when you click on that, it brings you to the main health dashboard section, right? So right now at the top, it says access points, and then there's a couple of links, but it brings you right to health, and it's an overview.
Yes, and there you can see some of the main issues you might have. So they show you, out of the devices that you have that try to connect to the Wi-Fi, you'll see, what's the percentage of the devices that we're able to associate to the Wi-Fi. So that's like layer 2 association. Then they show you the percentage that devices were able to authenticate against the Wi-Fi. So that's PSK, I'm guessing, and .1x. And then they have DHCP DNS. So you can kind of see if you have issues where they're happening.
Yeah, so you see the journey of the client, and Meraki is really trying to tell you where in that journey the client is having a problem, right? Whether that's, like you said, associating, and then after association, there's the authentication. Then you got to get IP address. Can you reach the internet, DNS, that kind of thing, right? So it is going through that journey here where it identifies the journey as, are there any problematic connection steps? And so there is a percentage. So in my environment, I have no issues failing to associate there, but all the other issues we generated were beyond association. So as you scroll down, and again, this is an overview, right? And I think the one thing that I always forget at the top is it provides you the time frame. And so in my view, it's just showing the last hour. You could change that to the last 12 hours, the last day, do a custom range. So I think it's always important when you're troubleshooting is to try to narrow it down to a time frame so that
Mm-hmm.
you can be more accurate with the troubleshooting you're trying to do. Unless you do want to see, you know, over a course of time where what the issues look like over a longer period. So from this dashboard, Francois, would you be able to easily say, I know what the problem is? Or
So
I
here,
know that
if we
there's a
look at,
problem and I know what it is.
yeah, yeah. So what we can see from your screen, just to describe a little bit, is we can see that 50% of the connection in the last hour failed the authentication, and if I'm reading it right, 100% failed the HTTP. Is that right? I don't know if I'm reading it right.
Oh no, it says
Um,
50% right there, Russell.
50%, but then it's all the way down. It's all the way at the bottom, right?
Oh, 0% here.
So
That's
yeah,
because
I'm
I think that's because no one. I think once you reach DHCP, there's no issues there.
okay.
But getting
Okay.
between authentication and DHCP, like half of those connections fail. Um,
Okay.
it
So
sounds like a
yeah,
lot, but I only have two devices connected. So
yeah, yeah,
it
exactly.
gives us the 50% right. So again, it's an overview, and from here we do have to drill in further
Hmm.
to understand, right? So you can now see things like, okay, which SSID um, are those
Is
failures occurring
impacted.
on, right? And I think that's a common thing that the service desk should be asking when somebody says they can't connect to Wi-Fi is which SSID were you trying to
Hmm.
connect to? Maybe also get the client's MAC address so you could maybe go look at the MAC address directly. But we'll get to that in a bit.
Hmm.
But we're looking at the overview page, and so we can see connection issues by SSID, right? Maybe there is a bigger issue with the SSID in particular, so that's one thing you could check, right? Or
Hmm.
maybe the most problematic client. Maybe there was some sort of update push to a client, right? For example, if you're
Hmm.
using MDM and you push a change to the SSID that they all should be joining to, or maybe you change the password, you can quickly see maybe which devices are failing. If it's all Windows devices, for example, you push the group policy update, you could see all those devices failing here.
And then here on the health dashboard, I guess it's telling us per SSID what type of failures they had. I guess the primary failure that we had. So here we can see that authentication is failing on your .1x. We can see DHCP is failing on your cleared stand. So we have, I guess, if we need to drill down any further, we know where to go. Like we know we'll have to check the DHCP of the VLAN we use for clear to send SSID, for instance, for your
Yep.
PSK SSID. For
Yep.
the authentication on the .1x, we know we'll have to look at the radius and stuff like that. So I guess it's giving us a little bit of a hint of where to look next.
Yeah. Like
Um,
where in the steps, the journey, the failure is
mhm,
occurring in. And that's at the SSID level. Um, so they are giving you different viewpoints, right? And you can kind of step into any of these depending on where you want to start, because the next table shows the connection issues by client. So you can just start
mhm,
looking at an individual client if you wanted to. And another useful one is connection issues by AP, because maybe it's not happening on all of your APs. Maybe it's a specific AP. And
mhm.
and in this case, we can see that DHCP is a problem for this AP, and it even tells you how many failed connections. Maybe that could be it. Well, if it's happening on this individual AP and not all of them, maybe the switch port isn't configured properly, right? That's just
Yes,
something that comes to my mind.
yes, yes. The switchboard, maybe the trunk doesn't have the proper VLAN,
Mm-hmm.
things like that. Yeah.
Yep.
Something that's nice also is the clients, and like you said, you can click on the client to get more detailed. But if you stay on the access point page, I guess you can also go to the connection log tab. So if you go back up on your page next to
Yep.
the health, you also have like the connection
Oh,
log.
okay. So right at the top, so when we clicked on wireless health, it brought us to this page, which it just says access points at the top, but there are 4 links: list, health, map, and connection log. So you're saying click on the connection log?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so now we're in the connection log. It's still the same time frame, which is the last hour. We have filters that we can do, right? We can sort this just by specific SSID, band, all APs, maybe a specific AP, a specific client, and which kind of failure step. And the failure steps, just so you know what they are all failures except incorrect credentials. So I think that's maybe that's a confusion for me. Where it says all steps, does that mean, yeah, so you see all failures except incorrect credentials as a selection, association, authentication, DHCP, or DNS. So right now it's showing all of them. All right, so you see all of these connection failures that's happening. You have a table. It's showing you the timestamp when it happened, which client, which AP, which SSID, which failure stage, and the failure reason. And sometimes the failure reason could give you the exact reason of why it's happening, right? And sometimes it could be cryptic. You may not be able to understand what that log message even means, or the failure reason, depending on whether Meraki has classified it properly, right?
Yes, but we start to get a little bit of text there, telling us what happened. So if you take the first one, it says we had a DHCP failure, and it's telling us that the client made a request to the DHCP server, but the DHCP server did not respond. Right. So yeah.
And it actually includes a real log message beneath that where it says type no DHCP response. The device was associated, because it says associated is true. It gives you a radio equals and a number. In this case, this is number 1. So this here, you have to understand which radio is which, right? There's a 2.4 and a 5 gigahertz radio. Which one goes to the number? I believe 1 is 5 gigahertz and 0 would be the 2.4 gigahertz.
2.4.
And then the next log message, it says VAP 0. And that, I believe, means virtual AP, right? So you have SSIDs connected or configured, and depending on how many you have, it starts from 0. So my first SSID I have configured is called clear to send, so that's VAP 0. And then, so that's what we could see here in the log. And so if you even look at the next log message, it says VAP 1, and it is a .1x error. So my second SSID is the .1x SSID. So that's what the VAP means. So that's what I mean by sometimes these log messages can be a little cryptic if you don't know what they mean, right? So this is Meraki kind of analyzing that log message and then saying, hey, your client made a DHCP request, but the server didn't respond to it.
And also what I like on this view is like it counts how many times. Like if you look at the third message here, it says client attempted to associate 6 times on the 5 gigahertz band. So it's good, like you said, it's going to try to analyze the different logs and give us more information about it.
There is a little informational button there. If you hover over it, they try to give you some sort of like next steps. So they're trying to tell you what the potential issue could be, whether that it says potential causes for association failure include poor signal, RF interference, high load on the AP, radio incompatibility. I don't know what that means. Problems with the client device drivers. But looking at this and the issues we generated, it's interesting because it was on the association. So I'm not sure what that was, why there was an issue. It could be my iPhone.
I think it's a password, no? Wrong password,
no,
maybe?
I don't know if that's the password because there's an authentic. Oh, you know what? It's not showing authentication for the password on. So that's the thing that I was trying to look for, was didn't know that I put the password in incorrectly. Because right now in this log, it's telling me everything else other than the password, because that was the issue we generated for the for the pre-shared key network, which was incorrect password. But here in this connection log, it's not saying that. I'm looking at DHCP. It's saying that it's not, or it didn't specify that it was an incorrect password. It's giving us everything else.
So there's something else we can try now. We can click on the client device and go to the client view, because right now we're looking at the AP view, right?
Yes. Yeah. So
okay,
remember your point of view in troubleshooting here. Look at the heading and know that this log is the connection log from the AP's perspective, right? In the column here. So we're going to drill into the client that had the association issue where it says the client attempted to associate 6 times, but it failed. So I will click on the client device. It opens that in a new window. And so now we're going to look at these client details. And so this is kind of what it looks like to troubleshoot from the Meraki side of things. As my dashboard tries to load, it's pretty slow. And I'm not sure why. Could be my awesome.
Yeah, on the client I had, it took me a little while as well for the client.
So it could be the server that my cloud dashboard resides on, but it's working now. So we're looking at the client specifically. It dumps us on the overview of the client, and the most interesting thing is it's got some details on the left side, right up top left, where it says the status. It tries to tell you if it's connected right now or not, and the last time it was connected, and on which SSID, which access point. It tries to identify the type of device. Here it says Apple iPhone, which is correct. And then there are some links to the event log. You can do a packet capture. But the overview page also has some client health data. And so it tells you the current client connection, where it fails, and then other health options here. So the first noticeable one is the section called Current Client Connection, where it has my client, and then it shows the AP. You can hover over these little images, and it actually tells you a status. I think that is one thing that is not clear, is that you can hover over, and it gives you more information. There is a red X, I guess you can call that like over the air, right? It's saying the association there's a problem there. But with the access point, it has a little green check. So Meraki is telling us the AP is good. So if we hover over the AP, it says the channel quality is fantastic, 1.4% channel utilization, and there's some usage. You could do some testing like pings and packet captures. What do you think about the red X? It says connection to clear to send failed, gives me a timestamp and the reason why it failed, which was due to no DHCP response. Is that clear?
That's pretty obvious. Yeah.
If that wasn't clear, the next section under that says health, and for the last 2 hours, 0% successful because of DHCP on the clear to send SSID on this specific AP. I only have one AP, so that's the AP. But then it gives you this little bar graph that says 54% latency less than 64 milliseconds. I think the one thing for me is I don't understand the latency for Meraki. Like, what is that? Would you happen to? What would you think that is?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, me
I'm not sure if they calculate it to the internet, maybe.
Yeah, so that's the one thing I don't know. So I clicked on it, and it brought me over to the performance tab of the client, right? So all of these different fields are most of them are clickable. So I don't have any usage displayed because I haven't been connected long enough and actually doing a lot of traffic. But it does, the performance tab for this client gives us some pretty good data, I think, right? So it's saying signal quality, and it measures that in SNR or RSSI, right? So right now, when I was connected, my SNR was really good. In the graph, it kind of gives you that good to bad, right? They kind of give you their own indication of what's good SNR and what's okay SNR and what's bad. Right now, I only see that it's good. So somewhere around between 0 and 50 dB is
Mhm.
good SNR. So I would guess around 20 dB is where it's kind of a warning.
Mhm.
There's a blue bar on the bottom, which signifies a connection. Up here at the top, there's a legend. So anything with a purple bar on the bottom, there's fewer or more events. Anything with a light blue bar, it means a connection. There's a wireless connection. So as you hover over the graph, it gives you those details.
I think that's pretty nice. So you have SNR, you have the wireless latency, the one you were talking about.
Yeah, the
Um,
average wireless latency. So let's see what Meraki says that is. It is a connection with high latency will feel laggy. Okay. High latency can be due to poor signal quality, interference, or high load on the AP. So in the earlier graph earlier graph on the overview page, it said 54% latency less than 64 milliseconds in the last 2 hours. If I go back to the performance graph or performance tab, where it does show average wireless latency, it says 100%, but it's under 200 milliseconds. So
it's
in
not
that case,
consistent
I
there.
meet the. But if we hover over the line in the bar graph there, it does plot.
Yeah.
There is latency at one point where it's 96 milliseconds. So that's where the overview page is saying 50. I meet
Yeah.
54%. Okay, so like you have to read everything carefully is what it sounds like, which is hard to do when someone's breathing down your neck saying, why isn't it working right?
What's wrong? What's wrong? Did you figure it out? So
What do you think about these
when
other
you look
graphs?
at just to end on the latency, we'll see that most of the time it's around 2, 3, 4 milliseconds. So I'm guessing they're just trying to test the latency for maybe to the gateway or something like that.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to go out in the internet.
Yeah, I don't think this is a clear I think this could be misleading
Hmm.
sometimes because there wasn't a high load on the AP. As you can tell, there's a AP channel utilization. So that's a useful graph on the client detail because it'll tell you, well, while this client was connected, was there a high channel utilization on the AP, which there wasn't. So I'm not sure where the latency is coming in from. Like, I don't know how they test that. So that could be a little misleading or it could throw you off in your troubleshooting.
The data rate at the bottom is interesting, except that they're not giving us a data rate; they're giving us a percentage. That I didn't really like that.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
saying basically a percentage, how much of the data rate that was seen by Meraki, how much of that
it's
was below the 50% of the client max?
Yeah, so what I'm guessing is that they're figuring what the client max data rate is when it connects, looking at the association request, and then it looks at which data rate it actually uses on the Wi-Fi, and then
Mm-hmm.
try to come up with a percentage.
But you think it
Um,
should be the actual number, right? The actual
well, it
data
would be
rate?
nice to have both. You know what I mean?
Yeah, display
Like
it both on the graph. Okay.
yeah, when you hover over the graph, they'll because right now if I hover over the graph, it tells me the percentage of the client max, but it doesn't tell me, here you used, 150 megabits per second as your
Yeah.
data rate, or
Yeah.
you
What
use
exactly is
MCS5.
21%? So
Yeah.
so I guess you'd have to figure out, well, what is the client max?
And
Which
then
would
and
show an
then
overview,
here
maybe? No, it doesn't.
is the client max over the channel width that you're using, or is the client max over 160 if it supports 160? See what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I see where you're getting at. Because if I'm using a 20 megahertz channel, I'm not going to use the
Yeah.
client max for a 160 megahertz channel. Yeah. So this, I think, could also be misleading, right? So I guess we need clarification on, is this client max for a 20 megahertz channel width? Is it already putting that into the calculation here? I guess that's important to know because I can see some people looking at this graph and then saying, you know what, we're not meeting our Wi-Fi requirements because we're at 0% of the client max
Hmm.
for data rate.
Yeah.
Okay. All
I
right. So
mean,
that's good.
it's a good data to have for sure.
Yeah.
Uh, And I kind of like the in the overview that you're showing. I kind of like the current client connection little
Yeah,
diagram. It's nice that we have the health for the client. It's nice additions that they
yeah.
didn't have that last time I used it. So
What I
I
would
think
like
it's
to
nice that
see
they
is all the graphs the same width, and then as you hover over one, it actually
like a timeline.
yeah, makes
Hmm.
puts a dot on every single graph. So you can, if I hovered over this latency, for example, is that because as you're looking at channel utilization, maybe channel utilization spiked, or maybe there was a certain number of clients at this time as well to kind of correlate the data. You can then say, all right, maybe the MR36 can't do 150 clients because channel utilization's already at 80%, for example, as you try to hover over the graph. I think it'd be nice
Hmm.
if it did that for all the graphs. But that's the performance tab, which I think is useful to at least see what's happening, right? Maybe because from here you can then say, all right, well, if this SNR is pretty low, you can then determine that,
Hmm.
all right, there's an SNR issue, and then look at RSSI to see if that kind of equates to what you're troubleshooting, right? So if a good SNR, good signal, we already know it's not a signal issue.
I guess it would depend on the issue. In Wi-Fi, usually we have two big type of issues. We have the I can't connect type of issue, and we have the Wi-Fi is slow type
Yeah,
of
yeah,
issue. So if you're trying to troubleshoot I can't connect, maybe the health and the history is and the logs is good. But
yeah,
if you're trying to troubleshoot the Wi-Fi is slow type of issue, I think the performance tab is nice because, like you said,
yeah.
you'll be able to validate SNR and all of that.
Yeah. So performance does not actually help us with the issues that we created to try to
Hmm.
fix this. So the more important tab for the client would be this history tab here, or
Hmm.
connections, right? So there's connections, which it's kind of like the Meraki health view, but at the client level. So we can see exactly where the failure steps are. And it fails to associate. Authentication was good. DHCP was not good. So as we look into this, then I can go, all right, well, let me look at the history. I think history is by
Hmm.
far the most useful part, right? So I click on history. This is in the last 2 hours. You can see here, 5:36. So I was up early testing this for you guys. Um, we
Hmm.
can see that the date and the timestamp. So if you get from the user approximately what time did you have the issue, and if they said, you know what, I came in early to do work, I was here around 7 o'clock in the morning, and I
And I
couldn't,
couldn't get work done. It's
yeah,
your
I couldn't
fault.
join. Yeah, work stoppage, right? So there you go. Those are the key words to escalate a Wi-Fi issue. But you can see all the very different issues. Like the top one is the DHCP server did not respond. So
Hmm.
that is an issue I created on the network. And so what does that mean, right? You see that message and you go, well, there's a little drop down arrow here, so let's see what it shows us. It just shows us the channel is on the 5 gigahertz band and the SNR. So the DHCP server did not respond. That kind of points you into
Hmm.
a direction. I think any other person would just say this is a DHCP server problem.
Hmm.
Would you agree?
Hmm.
Like, would that be the most common? Um,
Yes, I know it's my father-in-law who just stopped by the house. I was just saying, you guys didn't see that. Roel did.
I
That's why
did.
he's
Yeah,
laughing.
it's okay.
Yeah, the what I really like about this is that it shows you the information about the issue, and also it shows you the information about the RF connection of the client at the moment of
Mhm.
the issue, so you can try to see if you can correlate the two. In this case, we had really good connection to the Wi-Fi,
Yeah,
right? We had a really good SNR, 47 dB, and you had the issue, and you were not able to get an IP address. So at this point, I would say it's not a Wi-Fi issue. I would
right.
say it's a DHCP. It might be the it might not be the DHCP. It might be the way you've configured the SSID. Maybe you configured it on the wrong VLAN
Yeah,
that doesn't have a DHCP server on. So if you're the Wi-Fi guy, that's usually where I would start. I would be
Yep.
like, okay, which SSID are we talking about? Clear to send. I would go back to clear to send. I would look at the VLAN. Is it the proper VLAN?
Okay.
And then I would probably go back to the switchboard. Do I have this VLAN configured on that switchboard where I have this AP? And then if it's on there, then you can say, okay, it's not on my side. It's probably with the HTTP server. Maybe the pool is full. Maybe the HTTP server is down, something like that.
Yeah.
And or maybe there's no IP helper on the subnet, stuff like that.
Yeah. So I think even at a client level detail, you would have to then see holistically in an overview, is everyone on this SSID having a problem, right? So because I only have one AP, it's kind of hard to tell. But if I had another AP connected and I joined to that AP and it was successful in getting an IP, then that could further direct you, as Francois was trying to point, either a DHCP server or maybe as an AP switch port problem. So then that points you in the direction. So maybe if I went to the AP, would the AP tell us that there is an issue with the DHCP server or the VLAN configuration, right? So I think here is a good view to try to drill into that. So I'm looking at the AP. I clicked on it. There is a kind of like a health view for the AP. It says radius is fine. DNS is kind of a problem, but is that because there was no connectivity? But there is a DHCP problem on one VLAN. So as I hover over this, I can click on it. So if we click on it, it does.
We don't see the screen now, Roel.
Oh, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the AP
mode
view.
for a while.
Podcast. So I can see I'm in the AP. There's this little status section where it tells us radius, DNS, DHCP, or ARP if they're okay or not. And there is a problem on one VLAN for DNS and DHCP. So since we're troubleshooting DHCP, I clicked on it because it looked like it was clickable, and it does give us details. It says on this VLAN that's configured, VLAN 235, there are 2 unanswered DHCP requests, right? But that still doesn't tell me if it's a misconfiguration on the port with the VLAN or is it the DHCP server, right? But we can see the requested logs. So maybe we go there next. That seems like the most logical step, right? So I click on that. There is an SSID for .1x, right? So we're broadcasting 2 SSIDs, and there's no radius failures, and there's actually no failures on this on that VLAN for the .1x SSID. So maybe it's not the switch port. I don't know. But we can see that there's a bunch of failures, not only DHCP, but DNS. So that can kind of point to a VLAN misconfiguration, right? Because you can see the untagged VLAN works just fine. But the VLAN 235 doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't. What it doesn't tell you is the root cause. So you won't know if it's a missing VLAN on a switchboard, if the DHCP is down, if the pool is full. But at least it gives you a direction, right?
In this case, it doesn't tell you exactly. But that's because I don't have maybe the full stack, the full Meraki stack, because I only have the AP. So if I did go to then the SSID, I will tell you guys I just misconfigured the VLAN. It's not VLAN 235 because this is actually an access port, not a trunk port. So I don't even have VLAN 235 trunked to this
SSID.
Yeah.
So
here,
in that specific case, the DHCP might be working well.
It might be, yeah. So then part of the troubleshooting step would then check that DHCP server, right? So that was the PSK one. And actually, if we go back to the user, because I know some of you guys saw that, the other logs that we generated, right? Because that was a DHCP issue we generated. If we go back to the client, actually I have it right here. You can see that there was a successful connection. And I found that the successful connection log doesn't always show up here, right? It may say fail, 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 But then I know somewhere in between here, I did fix an issue
Succeeded.
and it didn't show
Mhm.
that I successfully connected. So I don't know if it's delayed sometimes or maybe it just didn't catch the log, but you can see here it was successful. And when you look at the success log, doing a drill down, all it's ever going to give you is just the channel, the band, and the SNR. It appears, but you can see down below, we generated the other issue, which was the wrong PSK. I entered it incorrectly on purpose, and so this gives us a little bit more detail.
Mhm.
And it actually says the password was incorrect, and then it gives you more detail saying check that the client was connecting to the correct SSID and entering the password accurately, right? Even
Yeah.
more messages saying that password is misconfigured. So
Yes.
check your SSID, make sure the password is correct there as well. So I think that one's clear, right? You put in the
Mhm.
pre-shared key incorrectly and it's wrong and it knows that. No
And
mystery there, right?
something I wanted to add on the DHCP thing, Roel.
Yeah.
I think the context is important as well,
Mm.
because maybe I'm sure you've seen that too in the field. But when we're deploying equipment, sometimes we're going to see issues that we're not necessarily going to see when the network is in production,
Yeah.
and vice versa. So, you know, uh, let's say you're deploying a new network, you're installing new APs. The VLAN configuration is typically something you would have when you deploy the new APs. You're like, oh shoot, I forgot to configure the switchboard, or the switchboard is not configured with the proper VLAN. And that's typically when you will have this type of issue when you're deploying the network, or the pool doesn't exist on the DHCP server, or the pool is full, whatever. So having an understanding of the context is also important when we troubleshoot, to try to, understand where we need to go next. Um, if the network has been in full production and we see those DHCP issues, maybe it's more because, the pool is full, because we know the network is up and running. We know the VLAN is there. We know it's been working. And if they have a DHCP issues, it's either because the DHCP server is like overloaded, or because, there's something with the pool. Um,
Yeah.
unless someone started to mess with our switchboards, which
Yeah.
which can happen as well.
And I think maybe if also the DHCP server did respond, it may respond with a specific message, right? Depending on how
Hmm.
some of these DHCP servers are configured, it could give a different message, because there was an issue, and I think it was on. I'm going to say my other client. It's actually the same phone, just a different MAC address. And so I'm gonna drill into a different client here as it loads. I think this is a Meraki problem, but because what were the other issues that we generated? Right, we generated. We need to look at a .1x issue. Like, what does that look like?
Hmm.
So I guess we could go back to the Meraki Health.
And .1x is interesting because it's usually because it's a more complex part or protocol, more things are involved. It's usually harder for us to troubleshoot.
Yes.
So it's interesting to see, what type of information we can get from the dashboard to help us out.
Yeah. So in the last, that's weird how it does this. So in the last 12 hours, I think that's what I selected. It's saying there were no issues on the .1x, even though we generated some issues, right?
Hmm.
Um, so it says no issues, but 0% of clients affected by connection problems, but there is a primary failure stage. So that's an interesting note there. So if we look at this authentication issue, then we can click into that. And you could see that the connection log for the APs, it says the client failed to authenticate to the Radius server. So there were
Hmm.
two issues that we created here. Actually, before we talk about that, if you look at the actual log, the event log, it does say authentication failure. but it gives you this num underscore eep, and then there's a number. And there's 3 logs here. One of them has eep number 9, number 1, and number 5. Do you think, Francois, that correlates to the eep messages? Kind of hard to tell, right?
So what I'm guessing is I don't know. I'm guessing it's just the number of eep exchanged they had. So if you if you have a 1, it means it failed at the very early
first
stages.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say the server wasn't available in that case.
Yeah. But again,
But if
we're assuming.
Yeah, I'm assuming. And if it fails when you have a 9, it means that you were actually able to communicate with the Radius server, but something failed in the authentication. So I'm guessing like a wrong password.
Yeah. So here we have the timestamps, right? So these were fairly close. So we can drill into the client, which I think is this. It's still loading.
So here, one thing to note is that you generated 2 type of issues. The first one was Radius server down, pretty much.
Yeah.
And the second one was, the wrong password. The user just enters the wrong password.
Yeah.
What's interesting in the logs here is that we only have one message. It doesn't really understand, if it's one or the other.
Yeah.
If we just look at
from the access points view, it's one problem, which is authentication to the Radius server. And there you go. Now Meraki's showing me the client. So this is the client on the SSID. You can see now it is associated, right? And you can actually see my user account, test user. And currently, in the current view, it's all green checks, right? So it's associated and there's no problems on the AP. But in the last 2 hours, there was an authentication failure on the .1x SSID. So if we go then to connections, we can, again, see that happening. But for me, my favorite view, again, is the history tab for this client. So you can see the successful connection. But now you can see the failed ones and why has it failed, right? So here, what do you think that is, friend?
Yeah,
that's clear,
so here,
right?
Yeah, it's a little bit more explicit. We have one that says, it failed, connection failed during authentication because the authorization server rejected the authorization request. So here, if we know a little bit, how the user is supposed to connect, which we should if we're operating the network. So in this case, I'm guessing you're using a PEEP with credentials.
Yeah.
So if I see this, I know that, it's either the user that entered the wrong password or it's the user is not authorized to connect on the Radius.
Yep. But that's not what it says here. It just says the authentication server rejected the authentication request, right? But it's not specifically saying that the user credential could be wrong or anything, right? It's just saying check the other APs, make sure that the AP is registered. Like that could be a problem too, right?
Yeah, that could be. Yeah, you're right.
So maybe that was the problem, Francois. I don't know.
Wrong secret
for the Radius server. Because I'm using free Radius, there is a configuration file for clients, and I have to add this AP as being able to forward those requests. So I think in this case it was that when we created the issue. Maybe I should have wrote these down when I did them, but it makes it a lot more interesting this way because that's kind of like what you have to look at, right? So you may have to look at the Radius server logs in order to determine what the issue was, because at least you get a timestamp here. And then there is another issue that happened a few milliseconds before that. It just says reason reserved. So we don't know. I don't know what that is.
That's not very explicit.
No. So you can then see the other issues we generated for this SSID. There was another successful connection. It tells us the channel and all that. And then here's the good one too. Failed connection during authentication. Authentication failure code, error code 1. Thanks.
Yeah. So that doesn't help us out.
Yeah. So could this be then the user account? that's incorrect. Either the password's incorrect or my user account's locked out because of the multiple failures that's happening. I don't know. Password's expired. We'd have to look into what authentication failure error code 1 is. And I don't know if that's coming from Meraki or maybe that's what the Radius server sent. So a little bit more digging.
Yeah, one thing that I guess we have to explain at this point is that the AP might be blind to some of these exchanges, right? Especially if you're doing APIP, the actual authentication, the validation of the username and the credentials is like within a tunnel, an encrypted tunnel. So the AP doesn't really see what's going on. It will see that it will fail or succeed, but it's not really going to be able to tell you exactly what's going on. So we don't have that visibility for that. You'll have to go on the Radius server and see what's going on. So that might, I like the fact that on some of those messages, they tell you what to do next. I think that can help people.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And I think too, it's important to know maybe Meraki has a page that describes what these errors could be, because we've seen different ones, right? So there's the auth server rejected the auth request, a reason reserved during authentication, one that just says during authentication with a error code of 1, and then we have auth server did not respond, right? So that can kind of be clear, right? You either look at the port configuration or your Radius server. In this case, I did disconnect the Radius server. I simulated some sort of connectivity problem in between. And then
I think here it would be nice here to also have the Radius test feature that you had in the SSID view.
Yeah,
it would be nice to have it here because
just
as
include
you're included part of the history, so you can test it really quick and see if maybe the username or the radius is reachable and stuff like that.
Yeah, I would say even like if it says run a ping to test connectivity, like have those buttons handy here, because right now I have to go off this page, right? So I have to click into the SSID, and in some cases it opens a new window, in some cases it doesn't. So now I'm back to the SSID, the access control configuration, where I could actually run a test. So here you go. Okay, is the Radius server accessible? Let me punch in a user credential that works. Begin the test. And so it says one AP failed, but it's because of the credential that I put in. So the Radius server was reachable in this case. So I think we're good there, right? All right. I mean, there's other settings that you might have to check as well, but I'm using very vanilla settings here to make it easy.
So I think at this point, they give us some information. They don't tell us exactly what the root cause is, but it's I guess it's expected. They could give us a little bit more, I think. But it's so I think it's important as an engineer to know how the Radius authentication works, because you're going to have to use your knowledge after this point to kind of figure out what's going on.
Yeah. And I think there's one more area we haven't checked too, and that's over in the raw event logs, because that shows us what Meraki is collecting, right? So if we were to, I guess, if I could go back to the client, the timestamp, I think that was around 6:52 in the morning. So if I go back, here is the SSID, and so we can actually see the logs for it. EAP failure, right here. And so these were the raw logs that it included underneath, right? So it's saying EAP failure with this identity, but it looks like that's about it. So maybe it wasn't helpful at all. I was hoping to see maybe it says it wasn't the Radius server wasn't reachable, because I can see the success message.
Yeah.
But I do not see. And you can filter these too. So I can just say all .1x. So here's an authentication, deauthenticate, success, radius response. That's a good message, right? What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
That the radius server responded at 6:52:19. That was one of the log messages. So if you look at that, then let me open this client view. Maybe we can put those timestamps together.
And correlate.
Yeah, and say, all right, if whatever log history event for the client showed at this timestamp, this would mean that the radius server was reachable.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, come on.
But if you're able to do that, if you're able to correlate looking at the dashboard, don't you think Meraki should do that for you?
I think so, yeah. So you're saying if you see this, if it sees this in the event log, tell me in the history that at 6:52:19, yeah, that this is most likely a user credential
Because
issue
it's up.
or a certificate issue, you know, like it is reachable. So I think it should say at least here that, because I don't know, so I think some non-tech, there's some users who are not as technical, right? They might just don't know what that means. I would just state it here, what's working and what isn't. The radius server is reachable. The authentication request got there, but the authentication server rejected it. Like it needs to be maybe a little bit more clear for people who may not understand. But I mean, that to me, that's pretty clear. But I'm just trying to think of in terms of somebody else who might look at it, so that we can tell that the radius server responded with a rejection.
It's implicit too, because when they said the server rejected the request, it means that the server is up.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. We just don't know at what part of that authentication.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that's where it needs to be clear, if they know it, right? I would imagine they're inspecting some of these frames. Like if we were to do a frame capture, we should be able to see which EAP message. Like it's not the. I guess that's not clear too. If we were to look at the EAP message for this, we don't know. It doesn't say, like in the other. What view was that? I think that was the AP's perspective. Remember that message? It said it had the EAP message, but I thought it grabbed it from here too. Where it would say like EAP number 9 or something like that, right? So if it was EAP number 1 or 2, like you would have to know which one of those is the certificate issue, right? But yeah, I think that's pretty much a good view of troubleshooting. But you can tell we hopped between multiple views. So there was a lot of clicks needing to know where the problem is. Meraki tries its best to tell you, like clearly there's an authentication issue, but you got to drill into that a little bit more. And it's not a Wi-Fi issue, right? It's easy to say this isn't a Wi-Fi issue. This is a authentication issue. There's nothing wrong with RF or anything like that. So at least that's clear. But in troubleshooting, may need to dig a little bit more. So the one thing that we didn't test was actually recreating like RF issues here in this case. Like I don't have enough clients to put a load to try to see what Meraki says when there is an issue with channel utilization, latency. Like what does that look like? Maybe I can try to generate that with a few clients if I have enough, and maybe run a speed test against all of them. I don't know.
Yeah. I guess to summarize, Meraki, I think the health view is pretty nice. Both the connection log on the AP standpoint and the history tab on the client view is they're pretty useful to kind of steer you in the right direction. They might not be able to give you the root cause every time, but they try to guide you into the right direction. So that's, I guess, the advantages of the solution. It gives you good information. The logs gives you clear information. couple of drawbacks is it might be a little slow to navigate between all the views, like we
Yeah,
experienced here. Also, we don't know how often that data is coming up. So
yeah.
we don't, when the client is experiencing the issue, do you get the log right away, or is there a
Yeah.
little delay?
I think there is a slight delay. I wouldn't say it is, you wouldn't have to be waiting a long time.
Hmm.
Maybe within 3 to 5 minutes it'll be there. But I have seen that sometimes it doesn't capture everything.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, we have to use what we have, right? So, um,
Yeah. But I think even the health view, what it allows you to do is do some proactive troubleshooting as well. So let's say no one contacted you, but you can see that 25% of your clients fails DHCP. Maybe you can take time to look in the back end. Is there something wrong with my stuff? Can I fix this? And then maybe proactively fix issues, potential issues. So yeah, I think it's not too bad. They're making it better and better,
yeah,
which
I
is
think
good.
so. Yeah, in the
Mhm.
beginning, it was just kind of like they just started putting it together, but there have been recent updates to Meraki Health, which I think is going to be useful for a lot of people who have Meraki already because it comes included with
Mhm.
whatever your license is with the APs. So it's not a premium feature that you need to pay a license for. It's already there, and you can start troubleshooting right away. And I think there are some people who don't know that it's there because
Mhm.
if you're not in the dashboard every day, you won't get the notification. But in this case, we can use this for troubleshooting remotely, especially, and then trying to drill into the exact problem. So it is much better than having no visibility. And you can at least get some data if someone were to say approximately when they had the issue, where,
Mhm.
MAC address, that kind of thing, right? So I think with that, I mean, if anyone has any questions, they can let us know, or if there's something else you want to include as far as like tips and some feedback about Meraki, you can head over to the show notes. That's going to
Mhm.
be, what number are we on now? For cleartosend.net
Two
slash
260.
260. And
Yes.
then, yeah, I mean, what do you guys think about including features like this with wireless, right? Because we've been used to controller based wireless, and it's there hasn't been that kind of functionality with
Mhm.
with controllers, right? And I think this is an advantage of using cloud managed APs in that they have a view of everything. They can correlate all that data for you, whether that's if they're using like artificial intelligence and machine learning. And I'm not sure if even Meraki is using any of those, but it is
Mhm.
worth noting that those advancements can be easily added over time, right, with firmware updates. But I think it's useful, and it's an interesting way to start looking into issues, and that way we can do other things rather than just troubleshooting for long periods of time.
Mhm. Yeah. And ask the users their MAC address and can you start to reconnect? Yeah. And obviously here we only talked about basic stuff. We didn't do any packet captures and stuff like this.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, just like Roel said, I would be interested to know, how do you do troubleshooting on Meraki? Especially those of you who use Meraki on a daily basis and support a network with Meraki. Like, I would be interested to know, okay, where do you guys go whenever you have an issue? What's your go-to page or pages to figure out what's going on? So just yeah, don't hesitate to share that with us on Twitter at ClearSend or you can leave a comment on the page on the website.
all right. We want to thank you guys for listening or watching. If you want to hear more about some other vendors' products, let us know which one you'd like to hear about. We're going to try to talk about each one, and so we're going to try to make a similar,
Hmm.
I guess, problem with them, and see just to make it easy to compare each one, uh, and then try to figure out how they each differ as well, right? Just kind of getting an
Hmm.
idea of how each vendor deals with issues, how they present it to you, and then as a user of the network, an operator, like, is it easy for an operator to understand the issue? Is it accurate? So I don't know. What do you think in the test that we did with Meraki? You think it was pretty fair of them to make their the root cause that they were displaying, or lack of root cause?
Yeah, I mean it's not bad. It could be better, I think, but it's not bad.
All right.
Yeah, something we can maybe try next time is try to generate something live and see how long it takes for the system to generate the logs.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds good.
To try to see if, because sometimes you don't want to generate the log too fast. You don't want to have like false positives all over the place.
Yeah.
So maybe that would be a good test as well. We'll see.
Okay. All right, guys. I want to thank you guys for listening or watching on this episode, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.
See you guys. Have a good week.